One thing I know for sure about retirement is there are far too many what ifs for the average person to plan for. What if I need long-term care? What if I want to travel? What if I live to be 100? Because there are so many unknowns, having an expert help foolproof your plan is vital. An expert like Cory Sickles, the owner of Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, joining me with some advice on this. Good to see you, Cory.
Good to be here, Robin.
All right, let's start with the basics. What do you mean by that, right? To foolproof retirement, it almost seems like there are so many things involved. How do you do that?
Well, I think really what we're talking about is you want to be able to have a financial plan that can really kind of be there no matter what happens in your life, right? Whether the market actually drops, goes up, whether we have inflation, interest rates, healthcare costs, it really shouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is you want to make sure that you preserve your assets, and you want to make sure you have enough money or income that's going to be there as long as you are.
And so when you look at someone's portfolio, right, you sit down, where do you see most people going wrong when it comes to building that and maybe, being on the right track by themselves?
If you really think about like 401ks, right?
Yeah.
When some people come in and they sit down with me, they're not really diversified. They might be in maybe one particular mutual fund or maybe two particular mutual funds. And really when I say diversification, you want to be in multiple products. You might want to be able to make sure, you want stocks, you want bonds, maybe you want mutual funds. You might want, depending on your age, it might be time to look at an annuity. You might want some like buffered ETF products that we offer, but there's ETFs out there for you. And then you might have some alternatives of investments. But at the end of the day, you want to have as many different types of products to be able to handle what's actually going on in the market.
Okay,
well.
you mentioned a couple of terms, and I'll just go ahead and say, I, as the average layman, right, do not know those automatically, right? So let's go ahead and talk about buffered ETFs and then annuities, which are a more familiar term, I think. But what are those? How can they help in that plan?
Well, when we talk about buffered ETFs, everybody wants to be in the market. That's it.
Generally, yes. That's everybody's feeling, right?
Everyone wants stocks or whatever that is. But what a buffered ETF allows you to do is it allows you to invest in a market. You might be invested in the S&P 500, for example.
Okay.
But you have downside protection. So you're still going to be able to have a good return. But more importantly, if the market does go down, now you're going to have some of your assets protected as well. And the other side of it is like annuities, right? A lot of people don't know what an annuity can do for them as well. And really when we start talking about annuities, really what we're talking about is protection again. We recommend fixed indexed annuities, which means when the market goes down, you don't lose anything. Which, those years, zero's our hero. That's normally what we tell our clients.
Yeah.
But you still can get growth on that side. And more importantly, you can also turn that into a lifetime income stream or a pension later on in life as well.
And we're not sitting here as day traders, right? We're not watching our 401k and all these stocks. Or are these helpful in a way that it's almost like a set it and forget it aspect of your plan, that you don't have to sit there and worry about this dramatic drop one day to the next?
I'm going to go back to the risk level. You might be in all these different types of products, but as the market goes up, you can naturally become more risk oriented because your stock portfolio might have grown. So you do need to be able to go in and rebalance that, look at it to make sure it's always allocated to whatever your risk level is.
Okay.
So you never want to just forget about it. That's why if you work with an advisor, we're going to be able to help you or meet with you quarterly or semi-annually or annually to make sure that you are balanced the right way.
And I mentioned, what if I live to 100? People are living longer and longer, and part of this whole plan is maybe you used to have to only plan for 20 years, right, of retirement, and now we're planning for 30 plus, perhaps. So is part of sitting down and foolproofing that also realizing I don't want to outlive my money? How does that look like?
I think that's a big part of it. People were definitely wanting to retire earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when I got, 10 years ago, it was like
hard,
67
Cory.
or 70. And now people are going, man, I want to retire by the time I'm 60.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're 60, now you might be looking at 30 to 35 years in retirement. But the one reason, I think the one thing everyone's scared of is, am I going to run out of money?
Yeah.
So, by having a product like a fixed indexed annuity where you can create your own pension. Pensions have gone away. And in most cases, for our generation, they won't be there. But by putting money into an annuity, now you're going to be able to have that guaranteed income that's going to be there for as long as you live or it can also be there as long as you and your spouse live.
I think it's important, Cory, with all we talked about today especially, to know that you can't foolproof your plan without some expert advice. This
Right.
isn't something that all of us are aware of and that we can get into the weeds with everything in. So it's a great time, right? If you're getting near retirement especially, to sit down and flesh this out.
I think it's always a great time to be able to do that, but then the closer you are to your retirement, you want to make sure that you're, maybe you do have a plan, maybe it's 5-10 years old, but you just want to be able to review that because, we just kind of talked about a few things, but you have taxes, health care, you have your investments. There's a lot of things that go in to make sure that you're going to be able to foolproof your financial plan.
Absolutely. All right. Cory's with Safe Harbor, safeharboroh.com. He's got a couple of local locations. So if you want to meet, complimentary, no risk involved in that. You can sit down even for a second opinion. You often talk about the importance of getting that as well. So, Cory, thank you.
Thank you, Robin.